Welcome back to Patch and Play. Today we're doing something different. We're turning away from cars and are going to do some laptop tuning. No worries, we'll be back with plenty of Volvo episodes in case you're wondering. Now speaking about Project Volvo, you probably remembered from episode 2 that my Intel MacBook had a freaky screen and there's no cheap fix for that. So I had to borrow my girlfriend's laptop in order to configure the car. Unfortunately, that laptop broke down too on our last trip to Spain. So I'm not able to borrow her new laptop now because she thinks Volvo software is the work of the devil and will break her new laptop. Luckily, I still have a functioning laptop laying around. This painstakingly slow budget Sony Vaio that is more than 10 years old. It belonged to the grandmother of my girlfriend, but she could no longer use it. Since I lost the power adapter, it sat on the shelf for the last year or so, but now that I have a use case for it as the Volvo Diagnostics laptop, I want to see how I can make it usable for as little money as possible. It is going to be a technical episode, but I will try to make it as clear as I can. Hello, Paula, grandmother of my girlfriend. It's in Dutch, of course. Now I think the SSD will be giving the most. I think the SSD will give the best or the most power boost. But I don't think with 4 GB of RAM you can still do anything these days. So, well, here we are. Before you say like, hey, that's not too bad, let's just, the crappy mouse pad, let's just go to the start menu. Yes, I clicked it. I actually clicked it. It's telling me it's doing stuff. Oh, there is the start menu. So I hope you guys understand that this is not really anything you can use from a day-to-day basis. Now that you saw that it takes at least 2 minutes before you're on the desktop screen, let's go back to the hardware part. So of course we have to charge it. So I went to the Chinese site, got myself a power adapter. I think this was actually the most expensive part. We have 4 gigs of RAM and this cheapo SSD drive from Somnambulist. I don't know this brand. I read online that it was okay. We're gonna speed test this before we put it in. Disclaimer, I would never put some kind of unknown Chinese brand in an actual laptop that I would use every day. And it's a good opportunity to find out if this is actually any good. An SSD is the modern day equivalent of a mechanical hard drive. It's much faster, and I'd like to compare this one to a Samsung 850 EVO SSD, a very popular older SSD that still sits in my desktop PC. I'm less worried about the RAM module because this is probably some old stock from I know, a more known brand. Anyway, so this is, it's 1600 megahertz. So let's plug it into the power source. This power adapter feels quite good, not as light as my rip-off Apple adapter. They probably put some weight in there. I don't know. What does it say? AC adapter. Will you burn my house down? So let's just plug it in. We have the green light and here we go. Does it fit? It actually does. And the light goes on. After a few minutes of waiting, the task manager finally opened so we could see the hardware on this slow brick. Let's start with the RAM memory. The RAM is used to store all running programs so the processor can quickly access it. The more RAM you have, the more programs you can run at the same time, called multitasking. You can compare it to having a store and a storage unit.
If your store is very small, you will have to run down to your storage a lot to get the right products for your clients. While having a big store means you can put all your products within reach. If you have too little RAM in your computer, it needs to read and write constantly to the hard drive, which is much slower.
And what kind of CPU do we? Oh, we actually have like a dual core, but with 4 threads. So it's not like an Intel Core 2 Duo that only has 2 cores, 4 threads. But as you can see, it's an i3, so they really didn't put a lot of cache memory in there. So it's an i3 2370. So this is like 2nd generation.
In layman's terms, the CPU is the brain of the computer and the i3 is a budget line within Intel's consumer CPUs. This particular one is quite old, so we'll have to see how it holds up.
Drive is still bottlenecking. Well, you can see the memory is only at 62%, but we don't have any applications open. As you can see, only the settings app. Let's just open CPU Z and Brave. This is gonna take a few minutes, so let's pause here.
As a last example, I tried to open YouTube after the browser finally launched.
So yeah, it's loading YouTube. Wow. Okay, you know, I'm done torturing this machine. I'm going to shut it down and shove in the extra 4 GB of RAM. Luckily, accessing the memory is pretty easy on this machine. Like what they do with business laptops, and this is definitely not a business laptop. There we are, and I checked this before, of course. There's only one module installed, so we can just throw in this module, and then we end up with 8 GB of RAM. I think 8 GB should be enough for day-to-day usage.
Installing RAM is often the easiest upgrade on a laptop. You just shove in the new module at a 45-degree angle and push it down in the slot.
Well, I told you Windows was probably doing updates. Oh, let's sit this right out. So I am actually testing this Somnambulist, it means sleepwalker apparently, using this brand new SATA to USB 3 cable. I will put this inside of my 10-year-old PC, but it's still fast enough to do some decent testing. And on the right we have the results of this Chinese SSD, and on the left we have the actual results for the Samsung EVO 850 SSD that is inside of my desktop computer as a secondary hard drive. Sorry about this, I need to fix
Now,
this.
I quickly realized that the USB adapter could be a bottleneck. So in order to do an honest comparison, I will now put the SSD inside the computer.
Okay, I fixed the little LED thing. I put the SSD here. Above is the original one. So this is the test result from using the cheap-ass USB to SATA adapter. You can see that it's actually better now. So it does make a difference. This USB dongle is definitely slowing it down. It does make sense though.
So, in case I lost you, higher numbers mean faster speeds on the read and write tests. While the SSD definitely performs better on the SATA connector, which is quite to be expected, we can also see that the disk lags in performance once we start doing random reads and writes compared to the Samsung disk. But in this particular case, it doesn't matter much, as the older hardware in the Sony Vaio probably can't keep up with these speeds anyway. Overall, I'm quite happy with the Somnambulist SSD for the price we've paid for it. Before we put the SSD in the Vaio, let's see if YouTube runs any better on 8GB of RAM.
Ski instructions. Structure. Anyway, just something random. Oh, it's way faster. Oh, look. I need to blur this. I'm gonna be honest. It does feel a lot snappier. Okay, let's do something else. Let's go to Reddit front page. It's not too bad actually, it's not too bad. And this is Brave browser. It is making a lot of noise though. But you can see the memory is now almost at 4 gigabytes. The hard disk is still working quite hard, but as you can see, there is some updates waiting for it. So,
after playing around with the new RAM, we can see the computer is a little bit faster, but still very slow once you try to open another program. So let's continue with the hardest part, which is swapping and copying the hard drive. This upgrade should give us the most benefit. I just want to point out that the process of copying the hard drive is a bit technical. So if you want to skip this, you can just jump to the part where we install the hard drive. Basically, what we are going to do is boot from a Linux live USB stick so we can manipulate the original drive. We'll need to make sure the entire drive fits on the new SSD, which is smaller. Then we need to make an exact copy of the drive, and if everything works out, we will make sure we utilize the entire new disk.
So the easiest way to copy the hard drive is by just connecting it to the system that you want to copy using USB, and this is a Debian live USB stick, so we can boot from a separate operating system, so none of the disks are in use and we can make a one-to-one copy. So we will try and boot Debian 12. You can use any Linux system that you want. I do have one problem I didn't account for, and that is the fact that the source disk is much larger than the new SSD. So 640 gigabytes, and this is 256. So we need to do some tinkering in order to fix this. Okay, I went ahead and installed a partition manager called gparted. So you can do this by typing this command, make sure you are connected to the internet, and then you can launch the tool. And I hope we can now resize the partition of the source disk to fit on the smaller destination disk. So it's like a 600 gigabyte hard drive, but it's mostly unused, as you can see. It's only 50 gigabytes is used, so we should be able to shrink the disk, make sure it fits on the new disk, and when everything is working on the new disk, we can boot again from a live USB stick and make sure that the partition fits the entire drive. So it's been a while when I did this, so let's see.
We can shrink the biggest partition, the so-called C drive in Windows, only because there is almost no data on it.
Let's make this, doesn't really matter, we will have to resize the partition again when it's on the new disk, but new size is about 150 gigabytes. So it goes without saying that make sure you have a backup before you do it. Let's hit apply, and I think this will take a bit of time. In order to make the partition smaller, of course, all the data has to be shifted to the left in a matter of speaking. So on this old mechanical hard drive, this will take a while. So I'll see you in a bit. So I'm gonna burn a candle in the hope that it won't screw up the Windows partition. It seems that burning the candle worked. It says that it has been completed. Now, just to make sure, I'm going to reboot again into Windows and see if everything still works. And if that is the case, we will boot again in this live Debian environment and then do the actual copy of the drive. Remove the USB drive. That's a good sign. So, welcome back, Paula. Windows is booting for sure, so we're gonna boot again in the Debian environment and copy the disk. We are back in Linux and I've prepared the copy command that should do the trick. Very important, check where the drives are mounted, because the first time SDB was SDA and the other way around. So we have to make sure we have the source drive correct, or we will just overwrite all our data. So as you can see, SDA is our new disk and SDB is the old disk. So I looked it up and the dd command should be fine with copying a larger drive to a smaller one as long as the partitions fit on the new drive. So sudo dd data disk dump or something. Input file is SDB with the 4 partitions. Output file is SDA, our new drive. Block size is 4 megabytes, and then the status progress should give us a progress bar. Let's hit enter and see what it does. There we go. Okay, well, we'll let this run. Alright, fast forward. It did copy the whole hard drive, and you can see it's just like a one-to-one copy. So this DD is a really powerful tool. You can see it just starts reading the original hard drive, and then it errors when the new hard drive is full. So it just copies everything. But in this case, this error is no problem because all the partitions are way before the end of the device. So to verify that it actually worked, I had to unmount the new drive and remount it. So Linux will check the partition table again, and now you see that there's actually an exact copy. You can also just use gparted, that's easier for most people. And here you can see this is the original drive, and you can see this is all the space that's left, and this is the new drive. So now we're going to swap the hard drive, boot from the SSD. If that works, we're going to boot again from the live CD and then make this partition take up the whole size of the drive again, so we can use this additional 70 gigabyte. Okay, so the hard drive sits under this plastic cover, and then we have to remove the hard drive from the body of the laptop, and I think we have to swap the frame then. So when removing the screws, you can take the SSD out of the cradle and put the new one in. It's probably it's the same. I think it's almost the same thickness. It's a bit thinner, but doesn't matter because the screws here will hold it into place. So let's just screw it on the cradle, put it back in, and boot up and see what happens. Okay, first boot, there we go. Alright, that's a good sign. Alright. Yeah. Well, it was actually in the middle of an update, so I'm gonna complete this, shut it back down, and do the test again. Let's do the test again. I'm wondering if I'm
Still going to see the same username because it's now linked to my personal Microsoft Windows account or Microsoft account. No, okay, still the original username. Okay, look at that. It's certainly a lot faster. Look at that. This laptop is actually usable now. YouTube is always a good test because it does run a fair bit of JavaScript. Oh. It's not the fastest laptop, but it is definitely a usable laptop. Okay, so the last part is reboot back into Linux and resize the partition. So see you back in a bit. Okay, I'm back. Let's go to gparted. I actually really like this tool. I know that you can do this with command line too, but I mean this is quite intuitive. I still don't know what this last partition is about, but it took a little bit of fiddling with gparted, but I basically moved the last partition to the end of the drive so I could extend the C drive. We're going to move and grow the partitions, so yeah, this is quite quickly because it's only 1 gigabyte. And now it's resizing. It shouldn't take too long as well. Okay, no file system. Should be done. Let's reboot. Remove the boot stick. Wow, it still works. Yep, alright, perfect. We are done. While I was editing this episode, I remembered saying something like, hey, this old laptop can't keep up with the speeds of a Samsung EVO 850 drive anyway. So I decided to do the same disk test again on the Sony Vaio. And here we can see the results. And you can see that the numbers are quite a bit lower on this laptop compared to when the drive was sitting in my desktop. Actually, when we look at the random reads and writes, the numbers are way lower. So this confirms my statement earlier that putting a Samsung EVO 850 or something comparable in this laptop would be a bit of a waste of money because it can't utilize its full potential anyway. The purpose of upgrading this piece of antique is to be able to run Volvo Vida on it. Volvo Vida comes in a Windows 7 virtual machine, which is the easiest way of running it. And running virtual machines is not something a casual user does every day. So let's find out how this 12-year-old budget processor can handle running an extra operating system on top of the existing Windows 10. As you can see, with the newer hardware, I'm able to run a screen recorder while the Vaio boots up the Windows 7. Not too shabby. While this laptop is a bit too chunky to my liking and the battery is in a bad shape, I'm glad to have some kind of dedicated Windows laptop for my car projects. You might ask, GP, why don't you replace the battery? Well, the battery is a bit more expensive and this old processor is not really efficient. So we'll probably just squeeze out another 30 minutes of battery life with a new one, and that's not really worth it to me. But as you can see, not blazing fast, but the Vaio can boot and run the Volvo virtual machine perfectly. I'm sure you will see it a lot in the future Volvo episodes. While you are eagerly waiting for the next one, why don't you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future hacks and repairs. Until the next one.